Hi, this is Tanya Becker, and I'm your host for today's episode of PartsVu Exchange Talks Boating. If you haven't already, please subscribe to PartsVu Exchange Talks Boating wherever you get your podcasts. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any content there either. Today, I'm joined by Captain Frank Lecardo, the owner of the Naples School of Boating. Captain Frank has joined me on PartsVu Exchange Talks Boating a few times now, and we usually talk about boating safety, navigation, topics of that nature. Today, we're going to have a really different conversation, though. Frank lives and works in Naples, Florida, in one of the areas hit very hard by Hurricane Ian. Landfall wind speed in Florida was 150 miles per hour and ties for the fifth strongest on record in the United States. It ties for the fourth highest landfall speed on record in Florida. Ian is estimated to have caused more than $60 billion in private insured losses just in Florida, making it the second largest disaster event on record, only behind Hurricane Katrina that devastated New Orleans and surrounding areas in 2005. So we're going to talk about what's happening there in the Southwest Florida area. Thanks so much for joining me, Frank.
Well, thank you, Tanya. It's great to be here.
Yeah. No, it's been a while, so this will be a lot of fun.
Yes, definitely.
So Frank, what are you seeing in the area? How has the southwestern, Florida community at large been impacted by the storm?
Well, the first few days after the storm, every neighborhood looked like a hurricane went through it. But here in South Florida, I think we've got a really resilient community. And so I think a lot of people have just come together and we've really kind of put the pieces back together, at least in my area. We all have power restored and internet restored, which is great. We had very poor cell phone service for a while. So we're making our way back. But areas from the beach and, areas that are in the flood zones, they are still struggling to get things back in shape. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday I actually drove down to a local marina where I do a lot of work, and it kind of looked like a tsunami came through there, to be honest. But I was very glad to see that my friends at the marina were they're working hard to get things operational again. None of the boats in their fleet were damaged. They managed to tie them off the proper way so that they rode out the storm. They did not dry dock them. They were left in the water, and those boats made it. So I was very pleased to see that because they're a big portion of my business. So I was happy to see that they're in pretty good shape. So yeah, but the other thing that I see here, as I mentioned, is just an amazing sense of community. People helping people, businesses helping businesses. Whatever your needs are, someone's willing to help, and so it's been a real great sense of community. Absolutely.
That's great. And, many people, to your point, left their boats in the water, tied them off as best as humanly possible. Ideally, in a perfect world, you want to get all those boats out of the water into a secure storage facility. But that I understand that just wasn't possible down there for a lot of folks. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. A lot of our storage facilities are really, they're full to capacity. And so, some people that would have preferred to take their boats out may not have had that choice, and they may not have had that option. So, I think it kind of, it revealed some of the cracks in the system, if you will. But, I think in most cases we've done pretty well, as far as protecting people's property here. So, but yes, it was a challenge with trying to move boats around, and, also the storm took a turn. So, it was almost like, if you tried to bring your boat up to Fort Myers, well, then you quickly realized that wasn't a great idea. So, I think a lot of people started bringing them back down here. So, yeah, I think people really weren't sure. And this storm just kind of, made some turns that at the last minute. So, but yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida as a state, obviously, and most certainly including Western Florida, relies a lot on tourism and seasonal residents. I mean, how do you think this upcoming season is going to go? Which, the season normally starts kicking into high gear in November, December, and January. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Tommy, I think it's going to be a challenge. And I say that because last season we had a shortage of housing. And I think that this year, with so many homes that, if they weren't destroyed, maybe the first floor got flooded out. So I think a lot of homes are going to be under construction. So two things may happen. Some of those owners may come down and say, well, I'm going to rent something nearby while my home's being repaired. And then others will say, well, I'm just going to stay where, in whatever state that I'm, don't really want to spend my winter in. But, I think maybe they'll just refrain from coming down. Maybe they have a property management company. So I think it's going to really mix things up a little bit. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly what's going to happen. But, last year there were some places available, but they were very expensive luxury rentals. And, so you were either out of luck or out of budget, unfortunately, with housing needs. So I do think that this year it's gonna change things a little bit. So I think it remains to be seen. Look, restaurants and stores and shops, they all want to get reopened as soon as possible. And the truth is, we have a lot more people that are permanent residents here now. So it may not be quite as seasonal as it once used to be. So even in the couple of years that I've been here, I've noticed more and more people are permanent residents. They don't really travel back and forth anywhere. So I think it remains to be seen. But so I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
How did those in Naples, maybe specifically, how did those those really expensive luxury apartments, right along the water? How did they fare? Is it a mixed bag or?
Well, some of the newer buildings, all the windows are hurricane windows. Mm-hmm. I think the damage is at the lower levels. The parking garages, I've seen a lot of cars getting towed away out of the beach areas. And certainly, the first floor condos, a lot of those got flooded out. Even if you had hurricane windows, the water was still going to find a way in. Mm-hmm. But the higher buildings, I think at those levels, I don't think that there was really much impact. I could be wrong, but from what I observed, I didn't really notice any real damage to those. So,
gotcha. How are small businesses in the area being impacted?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of business you're in, quite honestly. Construction workers, especially the ones that are dock builders and seawall construction companies, I think those guys are going to be really busy for a while. They were already under a lot of demand, just, with sort of the housing boom that was already happening here. So I think right now they're going to be, they could be backlogged for a little bit. But, and then there's other businesses, kind of like, I hate to say it, but kind of like Naples School of Boating, where I'm just in a holding pattern because, right now our waterways aren't really all that safe to operate in. There's a lot of debris in the water. And so I think a lot of the more recreational side of things are really on hold. And we are also dependent on, some of the seasonal folks that come down here. So it's going to be a challenge, but, we will rebound and we will be fine. But yeah, some of the businesses that have to be closed for a period of time, the double whammy for them, take a restaurant, for example, if they're shut down for 2 months while they're rebuilding, well, not only do they have the cost of rebuilding, but they have the lost revenue of not being able to serve customers. So, we have to look at that factor of it too. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And you at the Naples School of Boating, you don't have a storefront per se, but obviously you're a big part of the economy and if, folks aren't coming down and need training, it's going to hurt you, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I'm sort of in a holding pattern and I've got plenty of people in my pipeline that want to do a training, but one of the challenges is some of these people may say, well, gee, we'd love to go boating right now, but I've got to redo my house. And so, I think, from a standpoint of priorities, I think other things are going to get in the way of boating, unfortunately.
Yeah. Some people, I think, would prioritize a boat over the house, but that may not go well, in the household at large.
Yeah, I think I see your point there, Tanya, for sure. I'm in the camp of let's go boating and let the contractors worry about the house. But, some people are a little bit more hands-on than others, and they prefer to be monitoring the process.
Exactly. I know there's a lot of pain down there, but to your point, the region is going to rebuild. Of course, there's been storms before. They'll, and it's always rebuilt. My concern though is that, we talk about these huge storms being once in a generation storms or once every 50 years or so, but Ian was the sixth major hurricane to hit the Gulf in the last 6 years. And over the past 6 years, 6 hurricanes Cat 4 or higher have hit the continental US. this isn't even to mention the devastation that's been done in the Caribbean and Puerto Rico, et cetera. And there's,
Right.
Studies are showing a link between ocean surface temperature and tropical storm intensity, warmer waters fueling more energetic storms. I mean, and the climate models are reflecting continual warming. So, we're going to have to deal with this more and more and more. I mean, are people rethinking how they're going to protect their property and from damage and just overall like life kind of management?
Well, I definitely think the water temperature has an effect on the intensity of these storms. In fact, just a week before the hurricane, I was doing a training session, and we were commenting about the sea surface temperature being 89 degrees. Mm-hmm. That's a salt bath. I mean, it's hot. Mm-hmm. It's almost 90 degrees. So, I do think that those higher temperatures do play a part in it. But full disclosure, this is my first hurricane here in Florida. I moved down here about 2 years ago. So I lived through my first one, and so I learned a few things myself about, what to do, how to prepare. So, having been through the first one, I realized that I did make a couple of rookie mistakes. So for one thing, I will have a shelf in my pantry dedicated to non-perishable foods and bottled water. And I will have all of that stocked, at the beginning of hurricane season. So before there's anybody rushing out to try and get those supplies, I will already have some on hand. I may need to buy a little bit more, but I won't be scrambling for them. So that's first thing. The other thing that I did was, I think I will invest in a portable generator. My neighbor was kind enough to loan me a small portable Honda generator, and that was enough for me to run a lamp, plug in my phone and keep it charged, and run my refrigerator. So nice. I was blessed to have that opportunity. So I think that I will probably invest in a small generator. I would love one that powers my whole house, but maybe a few years down the road. But I think for the meantime, a portable generator is a great idea. And I will not buy it during hurricane season because I'm sure they will be sold out. But, yeah. But I do think that that's a smart investment. The other thing that I did, now here's where my genius came in. I decided, since I knew I wasn't going to have power, and we're on well water and septic, so no power means no toilet flush. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I took my 40-gallon recycle bin and I filled it with water before the hurricane hit, so that I could just simply go outside my garage door and, use a 1-gallon bucket and bring some water in, fill my toilet tank, and still be able to flush my toilet. So that I will definitely do again. That worked out. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to give myself credit for that one. That was brilliant. Some people fill their bathtubs, which is great. I mean, if you prefer to do that, or if you don't have a large recycle bin, but I actually filled both. I filled the bathtub and the recycle bin. So I had plenty of water that I could use to, wash a dish or something like that. But as far as drinking water, obviously bottled water, and we did bottle up our own water. Because again, we have fresh water once we have power. So, but yeah, there are things like that. So yeah, flushing never felt so good, Tanya.
I can imagine. You're just like, oh, thank God, one solution, one thing that's working.
Oh yeah, at least one thing worked out well. The toilet's still flushed. Yeah, exactly. But as far as protecting your property from damage, there's only so much that you can do. I mean, obviously, if you have hurricane shutters, put them up. If you have hurricane windows, that's great. You may still want to cover them just to prevent flying debris from hitting them. And speaking of flying debris, my Weber grill took a flying leap. So I didn't think that I had it strapped down pretty good, but it still got wings and took off. So just try to tie down everything that's out there, and if you can possibly bring it into your garage, that would be preferred. So flying debris is one thing that you can do to secure your property. So, it's, the tough thing is the people who are in flood zones, there's almost really not a whole lot that you can do. You can protect yourself from wind damage, but there's not a whole lot that you can do to stop the water from coming in. One of the things obviously is proper insurance. And not just property insurance, but, when you look at some of these businesses, and we kind of talked about this before, but, how do you keep paying your bills while you're recovering, while you're rebuilding your restaurant? So maybe some type of business interruption coverage where, you get a portion of your revenues or something, that will just kind of help keep the cash coming in a little bit. So, but yeah, that way if your business is closed, you're not completely out,
Yeah. I think one of the most, the people that fared the storm pretty, luckily, and it sounds like that you were certainly one of them. One of the common things that gets destroyed is our trees. Those palm trees are expensive. And I always say after every big storm, I'm like, gosh darn it, why am I not the person that owns the screen repair business? Like those lanais, like the screens get, those screen people, like this is what we should need to be doing, Frank. I mean, you need to oh,
for sure,
go into the screen repair business, from
or landscaping or tree removal. All those businesses right now are very busy. And they're, so again, like I said before, it depends on what business you're in. Some are going to do really well, and others are going to, unfortunately, just kind of be on hold for a little while until things are back to normal. So but yeah.
So I was just reading yesterday, I believe it was. I mean, the damage of insured property is astounding. I mean, this is the second biggest insured property loss, only behind Katrina. Which, I mean, it's a good way behind Katrina, but still, I mean, that it's quite sizable. I mean, but what about people that don't have insurance or insurance that won't fully cover the damage? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Well, as far as small businesses are concerned, I think that, I think to some degree as entrepreneurs, we accept some risk and we can't possibly insure for everything. In my type of business, I can't buy insurance that protects my income against, a storm coming through and I'm shut down from operating. I can't buy that insurance. So I have to self-insure for that. And the way that we do that is through cash reserves. As I like to say, I'm insured by the Bank of Frank. It's true. It's true. I've got to have a cash reserve so that, whether I have a hurricane come through or whether I break my leg, it doesn't matter. If I can't work, I can't work.
Right.
And so, we've got to put something aside so that, I guess you can say a rainy day fund, no pun intended.
Literally
but true, it's kind of conventional wisdom. You got to have a rainy day fund. And so for me, that's how I'm protected as far as a business. But as far as my personal property, I mean, obviously the more insurance you're able to purchase, the better. Flood insurance is not automatically included in your homeowner's policy. So, if you're in a flood area, you need to buy flood insurance, but I will say it's expensive. I got quotes on it and it was double the cost of my regular homeowner's insurance. So, it is, for some people, it is cost prohibitive. So I think you have to weigh the risk. If you're not in a significant flood area, maybe there's something a little bit less coverage that you can buy, but I think it is worth exploring the flood insurance option, especially here in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big challenge is people that weren't technically on a floodplain. I mean, they're sitting with a house full of water. So
exactly right.
It's, and they didn't have the flood insurance, and it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. One other point that I wanted to bring up through our discussion, but when we talk about small businesses, we often forget about the micro businesses. We look on the news and we see the restaurants that are all flooded out, and the shops that are closed down and boarded up, but let's not forget about the self-employed people. Technically, Naples School of Boating is a company of one. I don't have any employees. I'm the only employee. And so, I think that sometimes we occasionally get overlooked when it comes to, assessing hurricane damage and loss of revenues and loss of businesses. So I hope that when they do the hurricane math, if you will, I hope that they include us in not only aid packages, but also in the destruction and the damage and the economic impact of the hurricane. Because, we are businesses and we are part of this economy. So I think it's only fair that we be counted. And truthfully, this sort of, this came to light, I think, at the beginning of the pandemic when the first initial rounds of government aid were being dispersed and self-employed people were not included.
Right.
And so we kind of had to stomp our feet and bring some attention to ourselves and say, hey, we're businesses too. Just because we don't have any employees, that doesn't mean we don't have a mortgage to pay.
That's right.
So I hope that, like I said, I hope they include us in the hurricane math.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm sure every region of the country is full of micro business owners, but I think Florida in particular. I mean, you have all the the boat, fishing captains, dive instructors, all manners of people that cater to tourism down there that tend to be independent, tend to be entrepreneurs, and probably just them, in many cases. So it's
think about the charter boat captains.
Yeah.
I mean, right now the waters are full of debris. Even in the Gulf, if you look at some of the aerial photographs, you can see all this dirty water coming out of some of the inlets. Nobody wants to go fishing in that right now. And who knows? I mean, if I owned a charter company, my boats may have been fine in the storm, but what if the docks that I utilize for my business were destroyed?
Yeah.
So now I'm again, and I have to wait for the infrastructure to be rebuilt before I can resume normal business operations. So, there's definitely some challenges that lie ahead for in particular the marine industry. I think boat sales will pick up even more because, let's face it, a lot of people's boats were either damaged or destroyed.
Yeah.
So the repair shops are going to be really busy. The demand for new boats, I think, is going to pick up a little bit, at least here in Southwest Florida. But I do think there's going to be some ripple effects from this. So I think between now and probably the end of Q1 2023, I think is how we're going to feel the impact for probably another 6 months or so before things really start to get back to normal.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And we've seen major impacts on our business, even though PartsVu serves a national, a customer base. I mean, a ton of our, we have quite a lot of business in Florida and certainly Southwest Florida, and we've noticed an impact in our business too. So it's a little nutty.
Yeah.
So, what can those of us who weren't in the storm's path do to help?
Well, so there's a great website that I shared the link with you. Maybe you can put it within the transcript of the podcast. But there's an organization here in Florida that helps other nonprofit organizations. So they distribute aid based on whatever people's needs are. So if I'm assuming most people would prefer to make a cash donation since they may not be local. So you can go on that website and you can basically donate, a cash donation, and then you can decide whether or not it's used in Collier County, which covers Naples, or Lee and Charlotte County, which cover Fort Myers and Sanibel Island, which we know was hit really, really badly. But you can decide, where your dollars get utilized. So, and it's a great organization. I found them through an official government website, so it's true. We don't have to worry about it not being an honest site. So, but no, that's the other thing that I just want to caution people on is a lot of contractors are out there now who are pretending to be contractors and they're really not. And so, if anybody's asking you for dollars, just make sure that they're a legitimate corporation or business. Or nonprofit. So just be careful of that. Unfortunately, we have people that will take advantage of those that are in a disadvantaged situation. So I just want to be careful of that. But so the website that I sent you is a great resource. You can see all the different organizations that they help. Yeah,
and it's the Collier Community Foundation, was
yes, correct.
And
yes.
I will include the link in the show notes so people can access that.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's really the best thing that people can do to help. Cash donations, and then these organizations are great at sourcing, whatever they need, and they get it to the people who need it the most.
Yeah. I mean, I think in these situations, cash is always best. I mean, people want to send like random things down to these areas. I just think that's really hard for these organizations to deal with. I mean, what do you do with all this like random stuff?
It really is. You're absolutely right. Unless you're here, if I wanted to go fill my car with, cases of water, I'm sure I can bring them to the right place and get them to who needs them the most. But when you're at any kind of distance, it's just really hard to do that. So, but we appreciate any help that people can give. And certainly, Like I said, I'm very fortunate here in Naples. The damage was very minimal for me and my property, but others are not so fortunate. So there's a great need here.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, the next time that you're on the podcast, I'm hoping to have a very different conversation.
Me too, Tanya. Me too.
We'll go back to talking about boating safety and navigation and all this stuff. But I do want to just remind people that the Naples School of Boating serves Southwest Florida, including Naples, Fort Myers, and Marco Island. They specialize in providing on-the-water training for new and inexperienced boaters and those who just want to enhance their existing skills. To learn more about how Naples School of Boating can help you increase your boating skills, check out their website at naplesschoolofboating.com. And I've also included that link in the show notes. So
fantastic. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you. It's been great to be on the show. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the PartsVu Exchange Talks Boating podcast. Are you in a dock war with your boating neighbor for the cleanest boat? Check out our marine soaps, polishes, waxes, and more at PartsVu.com. And for free shipping, use the coupon code PVTalksShine, a special perk for our podcast listeners. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for boating knowledge, to keep in touch with the PartsVu community, and for special sales and promotions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and check out the show notes for the coupon code just mentioned, more information about PartsVu and the products we offer, as well as our boating blog, the PartsVu Exchange. And a big thanks to Mind for performing the original music featured within this podcast.